Let's talk about user management now. So for any complex system, you always have the resource management and user management. These two sides. You have users to accessing the internal resources, right? And how would you map those users into those resources? And one very important thing is how do you organize these users so that it's manageable. It's similar to resource management. When you have a bunch of your resources, different resources, how do you manage them? And similarly, how do you manage the users so that you can easily identify the user, authenticate the user, implement security, and implement the privilege. So this is the key to user management. Um, we but in a sense, managing user is pretty similar to managing the resources. We also use the same approach: group and hierarchy, divide and conquer. This is one, and tagging and automation. Tagging and automation for user management is very similar to those for resource management. Here, we will only introduce hierarchical management of user by using Microsoft Entra ID. So Microsoft Entra ID may not be a familiar name to many of you, but what it used to call is should be a familiar name. It used to call Azure Active Directory. So Active Directory is a Microsoft enterprise product that offers user management functionality in a corporation that runs a Windows servers. Very likely, you will have Active Directory. It's where you will register users, grant them privilege, and authenticate their access. So when Microsoft create Azure, inevitably they implement Active Directory functionality on Azure. And later on, they decide to change the name to Microsoft Entra ID. But I think the Active Directory, I still keep this slide here, letting you know that it was called Active Directory because Active Directory is still a valid product in the on-premise system. So knowing that what you are dealing with is actually Active Directory will be very helpful. So talking about Azure Active Directory, it is a cloud-based user management service. It's a native user management service for Azure. Now there are other services that Azure can also use, but they are not native not native to Azure, so they are outside of the scope for this class. Azure Active Directory is where the administrators can define the users of a system, register them, organize them, and manage the creation, update, and deletion of the users. It can group user into user groups for easier management. So the same action you do to a user group, to the user, can be applicable to a user group. Active Directory start with the name directory, right? So there is something called directory. Directory is a root of their hierarchy. Azure Active Directory hosted as multiple directories, or sometimes also called tenants. Each directory consists of users, groups, and apps that is used to perform identity and access management function for resources. So inside each Active Directory, right, there is a tenant, there is a group. When you go into the Active Directory interface, you will see that there is uh, different groups. You can define what groups you have and define inside each group what the members they have. You can define new users, new groups, and add users to them. And these groups can be embedded inside each group, so forming a hierarchy. So this one is actually more simple than the Azure resource grouping and hierarchy. In Azure resource hierarchy, you will have three different levels, different types of groups: management group, subscription, and resource group. Here in Azure Active Directory or Entra ID, you can have groups inside groups, thus forming a hierarchy completely consists of groups. Then you will add users to each group. Group can be embedded, thus forming a multi-level hierarchy. Usually there is a set of backbone hierarchy. When you define your hierarchy, usually what happens is you will first define a set of hierarchy, a backbone of the hierarchy based on organization hierarchy. If your company have like 5 departments, just say you have 5 departments, then you will under root directory you will have a 5 department group. Under each department there are teams. Then you will define one group for each team under their department, etc. So this is the backbone of hierarchy. You will simulate, you will emulate what's the whole corporate hierarchy. This is usually because the department you are in, the team you are in, the hierarchy, the position you are in the business in the hierarchy, pretty much will define what you can see, what you should see, and what you cannot see. That's why we have this group, this backbone hierarchy. But then outside of this backbone hierarchy, usually you will also have other sets of small hierarchies. Those hierarchies are similar to tags, that they are just across different organization groups to link people together. Like for example, if each department has someone who belongs to a certain office, right? Someone is in New York office, someone is in New Jersey office, someone is in Philadelphia office. They can form their own groups, and this group can form a hierarchy like a company employee community group. So and they can possibly have access to some storage, to some app service that can facilitate their activities. So user and the resource interaction means what you are going to assign users to resources, right? So if you think about what's the reason we try to do all this resource management and user management, when you have a user resource interaction, you always want to define what the user can do to the resources. One user may be different to another in that what kind of a resource they can access and what actions can they perform. This is the relationship between users and certain resources is what we are interested in as the security of accessing, right? So user resource interaction, in order for a user to use a cloud resource, two things must happen. One is called authentication, another is called authorization. And this is done through something called IAM, a service called IAM, Identity and Access Management. If you read through this, look at identity, there's a cloud IAM. That's the cloud service that performs IAM. So authentication is a process of proving that you are who you are, that you are who you say you are. This is achieved by verification of the identity of a person or device. So first of all, you need to claim who you are. When you log in, you type in your username. That's when you claim who you are. I am some person at some place. Now, once you claim who you are, Azure system will try to verify to confirm that you are. And if you want to think about who you are, this is identified by something that only you know or only you possess, right? So something you know, maybe a user password. Something only you possess, maybe your cell phone. So this, in the simplest form, it's just be a username plus password, right? And if you have more things to the, if you want to add more to it, you want to add more than password to verify. That's what we call multi-factor authentication. You are providing more factors into consideration for authentication. Instead of a password, you will also have something from your cell phone. For example, Microsoft Authenticator, right? Now, so this is one end to authentication, right? You want to confirm who you are. On the other hand, what about someone else prove that you are who you are? That someone else is what we call a third-party identity service. For example, if you already authenticate with Google, can you use Google to verify? Can Google come up and say, hey, yes, he passed the authentication, so yes, he is this person. That's definitely doable, right? So this, in fact, this is called federated login. So Entra ID supports federated login, which means you can log in using your Google account, Facebook account, something like this. On the other thing about the other side of user resource interaction is authorization. Authentication is what you are who you are. Then authorization is now knowing that you are who you are. What are you supposed to? What can you do? What are you allowed to do? Authorization is a process that grants or denies access to a system or to a component of system by verifying whether the accessor has the permission to perform the requested action. It will be allowing a user or all users of a group to perform certain actions on a certain resource, similar to what we saw when we check out the storage account, right? You can read, someone can only read, someone can write and read, someone can even delete. So the best practice is to perform authorization on group level to reduce management cost. If you want to do that on every user level, it will be a huge pain. For example, in our class, instead of verifying there are like 10 students every time I add them up, every semester I add 10 to 20 students to the to grant them access to Azure accounts, to grant them access to Azure resources. These are huge pains, right? I don't want to do that. Instead, I will just do a group, create a group, and define group with all the roles and the privileges. The next time when a new semester come in, I will drag and drop all the new students into this group, and of course, at the end of the semester, remove students from that group. That saves me a lot, all the effort of configuring individual users. So this is the best part of defining a user group and apply security on them. Then also what you can do is on instead of assigning privileges one by one, what Azure allows you to do is to create a role. Role is a collection of privileges. Role is a collection of privileges, and here the user group you can assign a role to user group, you can assign a role to a storage account, and so instead of granting read, write, list, this kind of privilege to one by one to a group, I will create a role, have read, write, list privilege. Then I will assign this role to user group. So this provides more flexibility and more management convenience. And there's a concept called principle. Principle is in the user world. Principle simply means user and the group. Any user is a principal, but then there's something called a service principal, which is a security identity used by application services and automations tools. And similarly, there's something called managed identity. It's an identity of your application and services. The difference is management identity um, are just Azure created a service principal. So when you try to do something, what you can associate a role with is either a user or group, or a service principal, including managed identity. If the service principal is created by outside application, by some outside thing running, accessing REST API, then that's a service principal. If that service principal resides within Azure, is something created by Azure. This is also called managed identity. So you can, for example, you can have one application with the security credentials to authenticate itself, proving let's say if you create a Python notebook, and that notebook try to access storage account. What you want to do is from that notebook, you will write a Python code with client secrets, with app registered with the application with Azure, and trying to apply a client secret. Once this passed, that secret is basically a password. So once this passed authentication, Azure identify that this link, this connection is the application you registered, and Azure will allow you to perform what role you're assigned to. And you can also, inside Azure, you create a virtual machine running some Python code and assign. So this time, instead of assigning the client secret to the Python code, you will directly assign the manager identity to the virtual machine. So any application run on that virtual machine will have the privilege to access storage account. So that's handled by assigning a role to the managed identity to that Azure resource. So these are the three principles that you will be experiencing: user and group, whenever you log into a portal, right? Service principle and the managed identity. And the difference between these two is managed identity is the provisioned by Azure inside and resides inside Azure. And regarding the role, Azure roles are fundamental components of role-based access control system, or RBAC system, which is used in control and manage access to Azure resources, a collection of permissions that defines what actions can be performed on Azure resource, like read, write, list, all this. When we combine them together into a role, then we match that with a group, then the group or the service principal can perform what the role allows them to do.